Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Andrew Davis. I'm the head of Invest Hong Kong here in the UK. Welcome to this webinar brought to you by Invest Hong Kong and KPMG on the future of sourcing 2021 and beyond. For your information, this webinar is being recorded and will be available afterwards to all participants via the Invest Hong Kong YouTube site. If you have any questions, please use the chat function at the bottom and we will then put those questions to the panelists. Now, I would like to kick off this morning's session by asking Winky So, the Director General for the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office here in the UK, based in London, to give us a few introductory words. Thank you very much indeed, Winky.
Thank you, Andrew. Good evening to the audience and panelists in Hong Kong, and good morning if you are logging in here from the UK. Today marks the first day of the second national lockdown in England. It certainly reminds us of the shockwaves that the COVID-19 pandemic has sent through the supply chain around the world. The impact on the sourcing industry and on the economy at large is very real. But instead of moaning about the difficulties, I feel energized this morning to be amongst all of you who are keen to look at ways to adapt and to make the best out of a difficult situation and to tackle the challenge heads on. As one of the most advanced economies in the world which thrives on trade, Hong Kong has a shining track record of being agile and resilient in meeting challenges and to scale up. First and foremost, the fundamental strengths of Hong Kong stay strong. Our prime location, our high-speed data flow, our low and simple tax system, the ease of raising capital in Hong Kong, and our common law system continue to make Hong Kong a prime location for doing business. 2 months ago, the Fraser Institute once again ranked Hong Kong the world's freest economy. And amongst the areas of assessment, Hong Kong gets the top rank in freedom to trade internationally and regulation. In the World Bank Ease of Doing Business report of this year, Hong Kong was ranked third amongst 190 economies. So Hong Kong is indeed a dream location for the sourcing industry. Not only are we strategically situated at the heart of Asia, we also have superb connectivity to the world and to the mainland of China. 100 airlines operate frequent flight services between Hong Kong and 220 destinations worldwide, including over 50 cities in the mainland of China. Major Asian countries are within 4-hour flight from Hong Kong. All this, coupled with the high concentration of the sourcing talents in Hong Kong, helps you, the business, to source the best deals swiftly, not only in China, but also those countries in the region which has strong manufacturing outputs like Japan, Vietnam, and Bangladesh. But Hong Kong does not only offer efficiency, we also offer quality when delivering sourcing services. Accreditation of Hong Kong's testing and certification sector is widely recognized internationally. So today, I know that other speakers will be talking about what more are there to offer from Hong Kong when we going forward as a sourcing center of the region. So I'll just stop here and would wish you all a very fulfilling webinar which gives you lots of opportunities and insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Winky. Some very good points you made there about Hong Kong as a location in the center of Asia. Now I'd like to hand over to Miss Linda Ellett. She's KPMG's Head of Consumer Markets and Retail. Linda, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and good morning, everybody. It's really nice to be here with you. I'm just going to spend a few minutes sharing some UK perspectives on some of the global trends we see in consumer and retail, and then maybe get a little bit more specific to sourcing. So first of all, one of the key trends is the pressure on consumer wallets. This was something that was happening anyway, and it's been worsened by the recession that's about to hit from COVID. Just this morning, the Bank of England has said they think the GDP in the UK will shrink by 11% this year, and it will take us till at least 2022 to get back to levels we were at in 2019. So what that really does is exaggerate a trend that we were seeing anyway, where people were shopping for premium products and also for budget products. So they wanted to treat themselves and they wanted to save money. I think it's also going to affect the actual purchasing that people do of what I call values consistent products. So people have strong opinions about the values they want their products to have. But let's face it, money isn't always where the mouth is. And I think that's going to be more the case as people struggle to make ends meet over the coming years. That links on to a second trend, which is around ESG. So that was becoming stronger here in the UK, but something that's happened through COVID is a real strengthening of the S, the social side of that. So people have really focused on local businesses, and for big businesses, they've really wanted to see what those businesses have done during COVID to support society. Perhaps speculative, but the charity sector has been hit really badly in the UK, as I'm sure it has elsewhere. And I perhaps wonder if there's an opportunity for businesses to be part of rebuilding the things that the charity sector did and working in partnership. Perhaps another aspect of the S is that together with Brexit and general patriotism, this idea of being British is becoming important. But I do hasten to add that being patriotic doesn't necessarily mean being anti-global. Certainly, British consumers still very much want to see global products and be part of a global system. And then the third trend I'll pull out is around privacy versus personalization. So this is about data and people's personal data and who they trust with that data. And we see this as a big tension that's going to be battled out over the next 10 years or so. So we have consumers that worry about their data being handled by China and Russia or being used in the wrong way. But at the same time, they want to be on TikTok and they want to have the best mobile connection and they want their phone to already have their credit card details when they try and buy something. A lot of people talk about data as the next oil, but actually I prefer the metaphor to say data will be like a currency. So at the moment, I give my personal data in exchange for things, but I don't even realize I'm doing it. And what I see happening is that people will become much more conscious that they're exchanging their personal data for something in the same way that they exchange money in a currency. And for big brands, this is going to be important because their trust is their advantage. I'm going to be far more comfortable giving my data to somebody I know and I trust that's a big global brand than a more local business. Just a couple of thoughts specific to shoring and what we're starting to see. So businesses here are certainly seeing that nearshoring would protect against the types of disruption that we've seen through the pandemic. But I would say that's mainly still a bit of hype or maybe a threat rather than real action currently. People still very much have embedded global supply chains. And a counter to any trend in that direction is that businesses are thinking, well, if we want to start to access the large consumer markets over in Asia, then maybe global sourcing is an important part of that, and having some local sourcing in Asia helps us with that. Another part of supply and sourcing is that consumers are increasingly demanding transparency. And if we have time, I can talk more about that later because there's a lot of developments even just this week on that. But if people are looking to be able to see everything through that transparency, then there's a pressure on businesses to do that. Part of that might be digitalization of that supply chain. And the other benefit from that businesses are looking at is how can we use that? How can we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to start doing predictive forecasting to see the disruptions that are coming to our supply chains or identify issues already? And then the final point that I make, which links to sourcing and we see our clients starting to look for, is how can you look across the whole end-to-end sourcing and supply chain? Because if you can do that and you can work collaboratively with your suppliers and your suppliers' suppliers, then you can find efficiencies across that full supply chain. Again, at the moment, I'd say that's still quite a lot of talk because it requires a huge amount of trust that everyone's going to benefit from that transparency and working together. But I certainly see businesses moving in that direction. So just a bit of a high level start point, Andrew, but I hope that was helpful.
Thank you very much indeed, Linda. That's very interesting. I particularly like the idea of data as a currency rather than the other metaphor that you use. But what I'd like to do now is hand over to my good friend and colleague Anson and Angelica in Hong Kong to talk us through the report that KPMG have done for Invest Hong Kong. Anson, over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Good morning to all of our friends over in the UK. A big thank you to Linda for sharing some of her thoughts, and certainly thoughts that I also echo, Linda, especially about the privacy concerns around data and the fact that perhaps data will be the next currency for us to consider. I just wanted to thank my good friend Angelica Leung, and Angelica is at Invest Hong Kong here in Hong Kong, heading up everything around consumer. And Angelica and I have been on a journey, a very interesting journey in the last several months, because we really wanted to look at, well, what's happening with the future of sourcing. We really did feel that there were some misleading headlines about what's going on. And so we really kind of wanted to set the record straight. And so we embarked on pulling together this research paper, looking at the future of sourcing 2021 and beyond. And we went out into industry. We went to speak to a large number of those CEOs, in fact, 35 plus CEOs, to get their views and to get their opinions. And so what I just want to do in the next 15 minutes is very quickly spend some time just going through some of our findings. We actually did this paper back in 2012. In fact, we were looking at it in 2011. It was interesting. Even then, there was a lot of discussions around, of course, rising costs, increasingly complexity, the fact that perhaps sourcing activities were going to move closer or go to more of a near sourcing strategy. Sustainability, even back then, was something that was being discussed. And equally, people were talking about how they're going to be using technology. Now, fast forward to today, and I think what we really wanted to share with everybody, what were some of the key findings of the report? Obviously, COVID-19 has impacted all of us. It's impacted entire supply chains. And I think it was also a wake-up call to a lot of companies to see how they can digitize those future supply chains. Of course, there was a big discussion about where is the next Hong Kong. Now, I've had the good fortune, I'm a Brit, a very proud Brit, but I've also had the great fortune of living here in Hong Kong on and off for the last 29 years, and it's home for me. But where is this next Hong Kong? Well, simply stated, I think we're never going to see another Hong Kong emerge in this new era of digitization. So that is something that we need to understand, that we need to operate across a more seamless global marketplace today. Again, there was a lot of questions raised about new digital technologies. And as I said, yes, globalization of supply chains, I certainly think they are becoming more complex, and we have a lot of issues that we need to be dealing with. And then equally, things like talent development, which we heard over and over again by those senior execs. So what we are going to see, and I think the key messages that we heard from those senior executives is that, Hong Kong is transforming into this new global digital supply chain services hub. And obviously, there's a lot of talent here. We also see the rise of ASEAN. That actually puts Hong Kong in a very strong position as well, because Hong Kong is going to continue as this regional hub as we see a lot of manufacturing continue in China. We also see diversification of manufacturing out to ASEAN and other locations. We also talked a little bit about the clustering effect, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. Linda already mentioned things like ESG, and we absolutely see the rise of ESG reporting, and also changing consumer expectations. Linda already touched on the fact that consumers are now demanding more and more transparency. And then, of course, new technologies. So this new paper will be released next week, November the 11th. We'll make sure that we share the new copy of this report with you. But again, a couple of key messages I just wanted to share with everybody here is that Hong Kong is an incredibly resilient place. We've been dealing with not one black swan, but we've been dealing with a number of different black swan events. And, you know, we've seen this perfect storm emerge. But I can assure you that Hong Kong is still robust and resilient in terms of driving a lot of that international business. Equally, of course, I don't need to tell you about Hong Kong's very simple, straightforward tax systems. Equally, you know, Hong Kong has signed 45 comprehensive double taxation agreements with literally 45 different jurisdictions, and that goes on. Equally, around the free trade agreements, we see a number of those free trade agreements getting signed. And then equally, Hong Kong is a super connector to the GBA, the Greater Bay Area. And that's something we are hearing more and more about. And that's connecting Hong Kong and Macau together with 9 cities across South China. And that in itself is going to be a very, very significant cluster in the years to come. I just mentioned about the free trade agreements. Hong Kong signed a lot, but interestingly enough, Vietnam, I think out of all of the ASEAN regions, Vietnam's actually signed the most of those FTAs. And we do see Vietnam now rising up in terms of becoming a significant manufacturing base. But the reality is that Hong Kong is still acting as this gateway to the rest of ASEAN for both those multinational companies as well as the Chinese companies, and that could be the Chinese manufacturers as well as other Chinese corporations as well. It's also interesting to say that Hong Kong's still at the heart of this end-to-end supply chain. We've been, again, hearing lots and lots of news. There's been, I think, lots of different articles talking about the imminent demise of Hong Kong. Yet, of course, when we look at all the research available, it is telling us a different story. And this is a WTO report, a statistical review for 2020, and it demonstrates that Hong Kong continues to move up the rankings there. And again, the shift from China, yes, there is a shift from China. And yes, we are seeing greater diversification. But I also think it's fair to say that this has not happened just in 2020. This has been going on for several years. The fact that big corporations, a lot of those big multinational corporations, did have the bulk of their manufacturing in China. And then, of course, as time has gone on, they've looked at elsewhere across the region. They've looked across ASEAN. They've also looked at Central America. They've looked at Africa. They've looked at a number of different locations. But obviously, Vietnam is certainly one of those locations that we've seen as being one of the main benefactors in the last couple of years. Equally, of course, we look at the total amount of textiles, apparel imports to the US. Yes, there has been a dip without a shadow of a doubt. But what I would say to everybody, of course, is, you know, it's not just that US market. There is a growing market here in Asia. There is significant consumption across China, as well as growing consumption across the rest of ASEAN and South Asia. And then you've also got the European Union to think about. So just going back to Vietnam for a moment, because I get asked a lot, well, you know, is Vietnam the next China? In short, no, it isn't. It is a growing base for multinationals, but look at some of the numbers there in terms of Vietnam compared with Guangdong province, right? The province in southern China. So again, let's just look at these things. And what I'd also say is infrastructure is a key driver. And we do see that as being a bottleneck for a lot of those other locations across ASEAN, for example. Equally, we've been tracking the changing global export market shares. Now, again, if you look at those categories, you can again see that Vietnam is the main benefactor. But then equally, of course, there are other markets like Malaysia. Of course, we've got Mexico in there as well. And I looked at this in the last several years where, of course, China was the 300-pound gorilla in the room in terms of those export numbers. It's perhaps the 280-pound gorilla now. But what I would say, of course, is we can see Asia scaling up now. And we did see that if you look at all of these different markets, they also represent a very significant manufacturing base. So again, if you put China and ASEAN together, Asia together, it is really a mega manufacturing center, and you've got Hong Kong there in the middle helping to navigate these more complex supply chains right now. And again, we've been looking at minimum wages, we've been looking at things like PMI, right? And the PMI index is interesting because, again, if we look at China, there was a big discussion about how, of course, we're going to see a significant decrease in production in China. Again, this is not what those PMI numbers are telling us. 53.6. That tells you that we're still seeing an expansion. So again, we've got to look at all of these different economic data indicators to perhaps give us the big picture. And if we were to look at those emerging sourcing markets in Asia, what I say to everybody is I just pointed out, Vietnam certainly is a major driver. We're also looking at, of course, at these other markets, India and Indonesia. Those markets are also coming up, and we were talking to a lot of those executives, and Bangladesh, those markets as well. And in fact, in some of the recent statistics that we looked at, the biggest spikes in production were actually in Vietnam and in Bangladesh. So, again, we just wanted to kind of share with everybody, this is an overview of the market. Of course, mainland China, as you know, is a huge market. But then equally, if we look over here to the rest of Asia, we are seeing some really interesting developments. Now, again, as I mentioned, we spoke to a lot of those very senior executives, and we asked them for their views about, of course, China, about the Hong Kong SAR, and we also asked them about their thoughts about markets across ASEAN or elsewhere. These were some of the comments we got. This was Anne-Laure Decours, the Chief Sourcing Officer at Puma. When it comes to overseeing those supply chains, Hong Kong is the best option with the flexibility and adaptability of Hong Kong people. We also heard from people like Christophe Roussel at Gap. Hong Kong is a safe place to be. It's tax efficient. It's got great talent. And again, these are all things that we're hearing. Gareth Brooks at VF Asia, with lots of those big brands, was also talking about, of course, Hong Kong state as an important financial hub reassures companies like themselves. But of course, there's always a challenge. And all of these companies, whilst they're here in Hong Kong, they're also looking over here as well. They're looking at those other markets. They're looking at how they can drive production across the region. And I think Gareth also made a very good point, saying, hey, we really, really need more data scientists, and we need those at Hong Kong educational institutions to deepen partnerships with industry as well. So again, some really interesting messages. In the interest of time, I'm going to move quickly along. And again, I work with a lot of those traditional businesses, but I'm also seeing the emergence of some of these really interesting startup businesses here in Hong Kong and elsewhere around the region. But we are seeing this new diverse ecosystem emerge. And also, Hong Kong now is setting itself up as this growing hub for tech and innovation. And, again, a big thumbs up to the government, because one thing that they have been quietly doing over the last couple of years is they have been building up programs supporting R&D, and they have been really looking at how they can develop innovation and technology. And this slide just represents some of the significant monies that has gone in to upstream production all the way down to downstream commercialization with the likes of Cyberport and the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park. And there's some other really cool things that we've been seeing. I also just want to mention before I finish this clustering effect, because sometimes people say to me, well, Hong Kong, can it survive by itself? Well, yes, it can. But the reason it's going to not only survive but thrive is because of this clustering effect. We see the Greater Bay Area, but we see places and cities like Shenzhen, together with Guangzhou, together with Hong Kong, really driving this impact and this clustering effect. And this is the Global Innovation Index for 2020, where you can see ranking number 2 is that Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Guangzhou corridor. Ranking number 1 is the Tokyo Greater Bay Area as well. So that's something just for all of us to think about. And again, we are now seeing places like the Advanced Manufacturing Center that is actually going to be opening up later in 2021, state-of-the-art manufacturing that is being run by the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park team. But there's huge interest in a lot of the corporations looking to drive all of that tech and innovation and literally latest thinking around state-of-the-art manufacturing. I'm out of time because I'm just looking at my little stopwatch here. But we also saw some other really interesting ecosystems. The mills. This is one that is if you like, an old textile mill that's been repurposed into this innovation hub with a retail experience, with a textile museum, an art gallery, but more importantly, it's a hub for all of those fashion designers and for those fashion-related startups. So there's a lot of cool things that are happening. And I just kind of want to finish off and just to say, and this is something that Linda mentioned, the importance of ESG, because that's what we're hearing a lot of from our clients right now. And I think that's, again, where maybe Hong Kong is also going to become a very key center in the future for sustainable finance. And equally, things like consumers in the new reality. KPMG has been very busy, not just on this future of sourcing paper, but we've also been looking at consumers during COVID-19. And this is actually something that Linda and myself have been very closely working on to look at 70,000 global consumers around the world, in the UK and Germany and France, but also here in the Hong Kong SAR, as well as the rest of mainland China. So, these are really interesting times that we live in. Where is China heading? Not just China, but ASEAN. We're really heading into this consumption market. So we've got the manufacturing market here, but equally there's this really significantly growing consumption market as well. And we talk about retail a lot, but we actually, perhaps we're being a little bit contrarian here, but we're saying that the world retail is likely to become redundant as we see the next generation of consumer commerce that is taking place. So, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, because I'm out of time, we are seeing those emerging technologies, AI, blockchain, 3D virtual tech. That's going to impact all of us. It's certainly going to impact those global supply chains. Innovation is going to be critical. We really do need to upskill with digital, AI, data analytics, blockchain, if we want to create those future-ready workforces. Equally, the rise of purpose, and Linda touched on this, ESG and sustainability are going to be so important. And then this shifting focus that we see of Chinese and ASEAN markets and more digitally minded consumers. Ladies and gentlemen, that's me finished. Thank you for your time. And I'd like to hand back to my friend, Andrew. Andrew, back to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Anson. Absolutely fascinating. It's really interesting to see that both you and Linda focused on ESG and on the innovation and technology space. I'd now like, Anson, you to moderate a panel discussion. But firstly, we've got Minish to give a presentation on his business and how he is involved in the sourcing industry. Minish, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Anson, here for having me as well. And Angelica there at InvestHK. It was interesting to listen to both Anson and Linda talk about Hong Kong. And what I will be talking about is from my experience of about 20 years working in this industry of sourcing. I've been involved in sourcing in India, in Taiwan, in China, in Hong Kong, in US, and coming back to Hong Kong after many years as well. So I've seen kind of the world around. I've been on the manufacturing side of things. I've been on the media side of things, the platform side of things, and seen it from many different perspectives in terms of sourcing. And there couldn't be a better place than Hong Kong to be in the post-COVID world. Nobody touched about COVID, but COVID probably is the biggest catalyst that we're going to see, giving us the biggest advantage here in Hong Kong for the sourcing world. There's a lot of things happening on a macro scale, from the change in the way retail happens, which KPMG talks about a lot, to the way consumption happens, like Anson talked about it, the change where China and Asia are going to be the consumption capitals of the world. So there is a lot that is happening, and I think Hong Kong is going to be at the center of all that activity. I am the co-founder and CEO of BuyHive, so I think we're going to show you a video about BuyHive in a second, and we'll discuss after that.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
In today's pandemic-driven world, the worries about reducing headcounts, physical stores, travel budgets, and restrictions have made sourcing extremely difficult. Luckily, there's another way. Here at BuyHive, we help businesses eliminate their international sourcing worries. Our specialty lies in making your sourcing experience safe and worry-free. We do this via our self-service e-commerce platform, freelancer-assisted sourcing service, and turnkey sourcing solutions. Visit thebuyhive.com now to register and make your international sourcing easy.
Okay. Thanks very much, Manesh. And hi, everyone. I'm back again. I'm going to moderate this panel discussion. I've invited a couple of additional friends to come and join me. So I've asked Linda to come back. So Linda, hopefully you're there and can put yourself on video. Great. And of course, Andrew Davis is back, and my very dear friend, Angelica Leung. And
hi,
Angelica's, hi, Angelica, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Very good. And I've got Manesh, my good friend here over in the KPMG studio. But great to have everybody here. And I think this is very, very timely. You know, I do think that, you know, we're hearing a lot of news. There's lots of articles talking about global supply chains, talking about, you know, US-China trade frictions. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now. But Minesh, I'm going to go back to one of your points, because you said that, I think COVID-19 has absolutely accelerated everything digital. And, one of the things that we're hearing as well is that Hong Kong now is kind of turning itself into it's transforming into this new global digital supply chain services hub as well. So just going back to digital, Linda, how about from a UK perspective? Is everyone embracing this new digital world?
Unquestionably, Anson, that's an easy question. I hope they're all that easy. I'm going to give a couple of examples. I spoke to a CFO of one of our global consumer clients earlier this week, and their comment was they've got to keep going on cost optimization, and the only way they're going to be able to do that is from digital across their whole business. At the same time, a non-exec said to me that he just doesn't see enough predictive analytics being used. So unquestionably, a real focus on digital across every part of the business.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Great point. Andrew, are you seeing anything along those lines as well? I mean, you're dealing with lots of different companies. Are we seeing the UK digitizing as well?
Yes, I agree with what Linda says. I mean, it's everything. It's really interesting that as we've gone into this period of another lockdown, that the big queues yesterday were outside a major retailer who doesn't do online sales, and you'd have thought that with what had happened earlier in the year, they would have made that leap forward. I don't know why, but it is interesting. I mean, there are certain constraints, of course. I mean, the availability of broadband. I mean, there's a lot of talk about 5G, and those of us who actually exist in the country go, well, it would be nice if we had 2.5G or even 3G, let alone 4G. So UK, within that, there are still the constraints of broadband and connectivity. So that's good. From the business side, I can definitely say that over the past 5 to 10 years, the British companies who've really had a lot of success in Hong Kong are the ones who are those who are dealing with the digital side. Now that can be particularly in the creative. So you've got creative agencies, you have got, digital marketing. Also, more recently, an area where the UK is very strong, which is in data analytics. And it's data analytics from the UK, particularly in the retail space, where UK has an advantage over what is existing in the Hong Kong market and the Asian market in general. They have been really successful. Companies like Mesolabs, who are a client of Invest Hong Kong.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point that you're making, Andrew. And I think also another key message that I keep hearing is the need for all of us to really strive towards collaboration. I think in the old days, we all thought we could do everything by ourselves. That is not the case, and we really do need to collaborate. And I see that with my traditional clients as well, now realizing that there is a real need to collaborate, and there's also a real need to work with some of these very cool data analytics startups, for example. Angelica, I just kind of want to bring you here into the conversation in terms of lots of headlines. There are a lot of headlines. Apparently, everyone's moving out of China. Apparently, we're all moving out of Hong Kong. Apparently, I could be moving back to Macclesfield anytime soon. Probably not. But again, is it really happening, Angelica?
Well, apparently I still have to queue up for my lunches every day, so I don't see anybody moving out majorly. But I think just before we go ahead, I think I want to talk to the audience a little bit of what Invest Hong Kong does. So we're part of the Hong Kong government, and what we do is offer free and confidential services for companies setting up in Hong Kong. And one of the business functions that we've been helping a lot is sourcing companies. So the way sourcing companies come to Hong Kong, it's not just the big ones, it's not just the hypermarkets. We're seeing sourcing companies of many smaller independent brands wanting to be in Hong Kong as well. And I know in Minesh's business, there's a lot of actually sourcing of PPEs from Hong Kong recently as well. So I think Hong Kong as a sourcing hub is much more than just being fashion or garment. We, through this study and through our discussions with Anson, consumer electronics, toys, there's a lot of things being sourced in Hong Kong. So we see actually movements coming in. We still are having actually it was, Minesh saying COVID as a catalyst. We're seeing a lot of inquiries because just how well Hong Kong and mainland, our supply chains have been resilient during this time. And as everyone knows, apart from being a sourcing office, it's not about being close to the factories, but you need to have those quality controls, as Anson mentioned, data analytics. So a lot of those points makes Hong Kong a really good hub. And in the past, we had a lot of trade shows as well, but they've gone virtual, but I do think they'll come back. So,
what's interesting, Angelica, if I can just interject there is, I think a key message that I'm hearing from you is there is literally something for everyone here in Hong Kong.
Absolutely.
We deal with those big corporations on a daily basis. But then equally, you and I, Angelica, went out and we went to Sham Soi Po and we went to the back streets of Kowloon, and there were lots of those smaller startup companies that were doing cool things from all around the world. So I think that's a key message that we can share. And you're right about the resilient supply chains. And Minesh, how about you? Because you were one of those, you worked for a big trade show business, senior executive, and you gave it all up to start BuyHive. Why?
I did not know COVID was going to be a catalyst. I would have gone out a couple of years earlier. But the reality is what I saw happening and with my co-founders, what we were seeing happening was a big change coming in terms of the retail industry and the movement of certain product categories, certain industries from China to the rest of Asia, as you said. But we were seeing at the same time a lot of change in the big retail. So the big retailers, the Walmarts of the world, Targets of the world, etc., were changing how they operate. Walmart came out with Walmart e-commerce. Tesco is planning something similar. There is, of course, Amazon and Shopify, and all these are growing. What that means for the sourcing world is a change from these large sourcing offices, as we've seen this year. Li & Fung, not because of COVID, Li & Fung let go 70% of its staff. Last year, all of the sourcing staff of H&M and Zara was let go, and so many others have been let go in Hong Kong and in China. But that was nothing to do with COVID. What COVID has done is this process of these big guys getting out of business is faster. At the same time, the small retailers are going to keep on growing. The small, medium-sized retailers, the sellers on these e-commerce platforms, the brands that sell independently, they're all going to be growing. They're going to need different kind of sourcing help. And that's where digitalization comes in. Can there be transparent tools that can be, with whether it is blockchain, whether it is AI, whatever tools are there, can there be tools that can be developed targeted at these guys? And who will develop these tools? It's people who understand and know the space. And Hong Kong has those people. So it comes down to those people who understand sourcing.
And the other interesting thing, which again, maybe, I'm not sure it was by design or by accident, but you just talked about there's a big workforce in somewhere like Hong Kong. They've got really great knowledge around merchandising, around supply chains. So on your new BuyHive digital platform, I think one of the things that you've done is you've gone out there to look at how you can capture all of those executives and have them on the BuyHive platform, right?
Yeah, and exactly as I was saying, we saw this opportunity that there is all these skills that are available. They're losing jobs. They're in the mid 40s, early 50s. They would not be employable elsewhere. You got to sustain the city. But at the same time, there is a lot of market in UK, in US, and the rest of Europe, which is growing, in Southeast Asia, which is growing. And these guys need sourcing skills. Hong Kong, with what you presented in your presentation, Hong Kong is not just a gateway to China. Hong Kong is a gateway to the rest of Southeast Asia, and everywhere is 4 to 5 hours by plane. And Hong Kong is a gateway to even Japan and Korea when it comes to sourcing. If you are from the UK, let's talk about UK right now. If you are from UK, the comfort level of doing business with people in Hong Kong and trusting the people to go out and do the sourcing work for you in all these countries, it's very high. Hong Kong people, the sourcing people in Hong Kong speak English, Cantonese, Mandarin, and many of them would speak some of the Southeast Asian languages too. They understand, they speak the business language. If they are in the apparel industry, they speak the apparel industry language. If they are in the hardware industry, they speak that. Electronics industry, they speak that. And that, with the education system that we've had in Hong Kong, with the ethics and with the soft capital that we have in Hong Kong, is super sellable and something that people are going to need. So that's why I say COVID is pretty much a catalyst that Hong Kong has to take advantage.
And the interesting thing is your business is going from strength to strength.
Yes, I mean,
more importantly, it sounds to me as though you're going to need a lot of top class advisors.
I'm going to need a lot of money too.
Okay. We know people. We know people.
Yes.
Linda, I want to come back to you. Sorry, Andrew. I just want to come back to Linda for a moment, because we've heard lots of stories. I don't really want to talk about the US elections, but of course, President Trump he's taking the manufacturing back to the US. Nearshoring, it's all going back to the US. How about Prime Minister Johnson? Is he taking everything back to the UK, Linda? Are we going to see nearshoring out of the UK? What's your view?
Well, I think given the UK has just gone into day one of a full lockdown for the whole country, it's probably best to stay well away from politics. But let me try and get my crystal ball out on manufacturing. I mean, I think there certainly are some drivers that are making businesses look really hard at this. So, the resilience of the supply chain, it's obviously far more resilient if it's far more local. So that's a key driver. There's actually a consumer trend around a focus on fresh produce and relating to health. And of course, that just starts to bring everything closer and shortening supply chains in terms of time and distance, as well as the environmental aspects of that. I think the most interesting one that we're starting to see a little bit more noise on is brands are feeling a challenge from consumers around authenticity. So, is Coleman's mustard still Coleman's mustard if it's not made in Norwich? Is Cadbury's chocolate still Cadbury's chocolate if it's not made in the Midlands? And so I think there is a little bit of challenge around that. But I think ultimately most companies are, they've got deeply embedded supply chains. They've got their manufacturing across the world. And so I don't think any change is going to be fast on this. One point to bring in, and we keep re-mentioning this, and it's good to hear others mentioning it. I think the driver could be about transparency of the supply chain. So if businesses can find a way for the global supply chain to have really good transparency, and with that, you get the traceability that matters to consumers and you get the predictability that matters to business, then I think people will still want to have their manufacturing in the best location for the manufacturing rather than trying to nearshore it. But I think if that transparency can't be addressed, then that becomes a really strong driver to bring it closer to home to enable it.
Good point. Good point.
Linda was selling BuyHive for me. I mean, this is what we built. We built on transparency.
You can pay me later.
That's because Linda is a top advisor. All right. Yeah. Okay, moving quickly along, and again, fascinating discussions. Andrew, Angelica, just what are you hearing? Is Hong Kong going to be? Is it going to remain this regional hub? you know, and what I would say, of course, is I would also say that there is a special relationship between Hong Kong and, you know, a lot of cities around the world, and in particularly with the UK. I mean, are we going to continue to see that special relationship?
Absolutely. I mean, the UK office of Invest Hong Kong has the highest targets, is the busiest overseas office of Invest Hong Kong. And you would have thought, after such a long relationship that goes back almost 200 years, that every British company that was going to come had already got to Hong Kong. But there are still British companies coming, and you know, it's still a good market. Of course, COVID has, you know, put a bit of a dent in that, not least because of the things that Linda talked about, the economic impact in the UK. But a couple of points I would like to cover off on. One thing you talked about with Hong Kong as a sourcing location, of course, one of the huge advantages Hong Kong has is the fact that the talent, which, you know, Nilesh mentioned very clearly, is their ability to travel to other parts of Asia, which isn't always the case when people hold passports, say, from the mainland or something like that. The ability for them to jump on a plane and go to Bangladesh or Turkey. And on a couple of points Linda mentioned about the nearshoring. I mean, nearshoring, as I've seen and talking to a few of our consumer products clients, it doesn't necessarily mean it coming back to the UK, but it might mean Morocco or Turkey. It might mean Bulgaria rather than China. So there are nuances to this. I mean, the only company I know that sort of completely ditched China was one where they could actually move to a completely automatic factory in the UK, so they didn't need the cheap labor of China. So therefore, being, I think it was in somewhere like Coventry, they could have a completely robotic factory doing what they're doing. So that was driven by technology, not necessarily by the need to nearshore.
Sure, and you're right, Andrew. I think we are going to see that breakthrough in terms of automation. You know, we are going to see Industry 4.0 that will happen. Angelica, again, any thoughts from your side? I mean, I think we're still seeing not just UK companies, but we're still seeing a large number of other companies coming over here, coming to Hong Kong, using it as a stepping stone into you know, the rest of China, as well as looking at ASEAN as well. Is that what you're seeing?
Well, you know, the 70-page report that we're going to have next week, one of the key points we're talking about is the Greater Bay Area. And we're seeing companies saying made in China for China, which means it also echoes the point of nearshoring. But, you know, mainland China, ASEAN now is definitely already a consumer market. And anyone in Europe who still thinks it's just a manufacturing hub has to come here after the lockdown and really see for yourself the amount of purchasing power that's available here. So in the past, maybe some things were made in China, made in Asia, shipped back to other you know, warehouses around the world. Then you may be using e-commerce or other things coming back. So now a lot of the sourcing offices are also looking at using bonded warehouses, or, you know, being having smaller MOQs, just to be very agile and serve the neighborhood that they're in. So I think that point also gives Hong Kong an edge, because precisely because we're not a manufacturing hub, a lot of the high value management, finance, infrastructure, logistics planning, all those roles are going to be put in Hong Kong. Yeah, so I think
that was interesting, wasn't it? Because we heard that. We were talking to a couple of the Japanese manufacturers, and they were saying, whilst they're going to continue manufacturing in China, that's not going to change. They are going to diversify production to Vietnam and Thailand. But they then told us, Angelica, that with regards to the next generation, the e-commerce side of the business, that they were also going to use Hong Kong as a center, and they were going to use Hong Kong as that e-commerce center to move everything around, as in terms of that hub, and move everything around
Anson. I
the
think
region.
We didn't mention anything about the details of Hong Kong taxation rates, which we do feature in the report. But by being a free port in Hong Kong means that no matter your samples or your warehousing comes in and out of Hong Kong duty free. And thanks, Minesh, for nodding. I think that's a really important point for sourcing companies to bear in mind, the ease of having things come in and out.
Yeah, very, very, very true. Very true. I was going to say just a couple of quick observations. There was a very interesting article today. I'm not too sure if you saw that, but President Xi Jinping already announced that China, would be opening up in terms of they would be looking to import $22 trillion worth of goods and products in the next 10 years. Now, that's a huge number. And that goes to your point, Angelica, in the fact that China used to be the world's factory. And it's changed, right? It's evolved. And I think ASEAN as well, we're now seeing the next generation of consumers emerge. So we're looking at those Chinese consumers, we're looking at those consumers around the rest of Asia as well. 300 million millennial consumers in China, another 170 million Gen Z consumers as well. So, that for us is a huge market. There's a huge opportunity for UK companies as well, from my point of view, that can continue to come into Hong Kong, SAR, and the rest of China as well.
I'll add 2 points to that, to what Anthony said. So one is there is an opportunity for companies, especially European companies, to kind of copy what Apple did, designed in the UK and manufactured here for the Chinese audience, controlled out of Hong Kong. So that's a big opportunity. And I think Angelica should sell that to everybody coming from Europe and US. Mm-hmm. The second part of that is the trade, the international trade depends a lot on the financing available. And Hong Kong is, in the post-COVID world, the liquidity that Hong Kong has because of China flowing its capital through Hong Kong is going to lead to a lot of trade financing and trade financing opportunities and liquidity that can become an attraction for businesses to set up here so that they can take advantage of that. And that is something that needs to be talked about more and used to attract companies into Hong Kong.
Sure. Thanks very much. We are out of time, but maybe just if you can bear with me for 3 or 4 minutes, because we did start 5 minutes late. So I think we've still got a couple more minutes. I've got a couple of other quick questions for the people here, because we've got a great panel with us this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are. One of the things that we do here is, government now, governments are taking a fresh look at technology and innovation. Angelica, I definitely think this is something that we saw, and there's a lot of information that shows, now that we have this technology and, an innovation agenda. I think Hong Kong government's pushing that hard. Linda, how about for the UK? Is that, again, something that you're seeing? Is the UK also pushing the technology and innovation agenda? And of course, are you going to sort out track and trace?
I might just take the first question there, as the second one's not in my remit. Absolutely, the UK government's emphasised its commitment to technology, to innovation. It said it's going to increase its spend on R&D and science more generally, as well as sort of revamping what's called the industrial strategy policy, emphasising tech and innovation. I think inevitably COVID has delayed a lot of the flesh on the bones of that. So it's still yet to be seen. I think there is a huge commitment in the UK, though, from the government towards many startups and really supporting tech and innovation from that perspective, both in terms of creating an environment that makes it possible, as well as funding to support it, not least because that's a huge area for future employment as well. I think one area we've got to focus on is around education. So it's all very well, focusing on technology and innovation, but we've got to bring people into the workforce with the skills to take advantage of that. So I think there is a commitment. There's not lots of detail, but there is a will, and it will take sort of policy in different areas to get us there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Education is going to be key. That's what we heard from a lot of those senior executives. Talent development, and I think it's industry in partnership with those education institutions as well, and that's something that Angelica and I were also talking about. We're out of time, but just final comments from each of you. I, of course, love buzzwords, but what's your key messages, or what's your key message to the senior executives that have joined us this morning, this afternoon? Linda, what's your key message? What's your key buzzword for those executives that have joined the webinar? What should they be thinking about in 2021?
So I'll use the buzzword trust, but I mean it in two ways. One is, having your consumers trusting you in every different way is critical. But also from what I've seen is, your people or your employees, colleagues, whatever phrase you use, you've got to trust your people. It's easy in a time of crisis to be looking to be more directive and controlling, but the businesses that we're seeing really thriving are those where they've set clear objectives, clear leadership, clear purpose, and then they're trusting their people to do what they've asked of them and act in the right way. So for me, trust with consumers and trust with your people is the buzzword.
Excellent. Great buzzword. Minesh, better be good. Come on.
Mine is gig economy. There is a lot of skills available, and you don't need to hire those skills by paying for them on your headcounts. You can access those skills through networks. And I think that is going to be the future of the sourcing industry as well, in terms of the skills that we have here in Hong Kong.
Okay, networks, because gig economy can conjure up some negative thinking as well, perhaps. Andrew, what's your profound buzzword?
Adaptability. I think, Hong Kong is showing its ability to adapt to the new environment in sourcing and in various other things. And I think that is something that both companies and governments need to think about as they go forward. We are in a different environment. I refuse to use the expression that everyone used to use about post-COVID, but I think adaptability is something that companies and governments all need to take into account as they go forward.
Very good. Angelica, what's your buzzword? What's your key message? And you can't say Hong Kong.
Talk to us. Talk to us. There's a lot of things that we can cover in a webinar, but in the end, every company is different. Have a conversation with us or with Anson. It can be anywhere in the world, but talk to us.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think absolutely talk to us. That's a great way to end this session. My buzzword would be, of course, innovate or die. Bit profound that, but I do think we really do need to wake up, smell the coffee, smell the roses, and we have to understand that we are now dealing with these new digital supply chains, and they're here to stay. We're not going to go back to the old normal. Okay, Andrew, any final comments? Because we are over time, and I apologize to all of the people joining us.
Well, come on, Anson, when you've got you and I involved in the panel, we're bound to say too much and go over time. So no, I just would like to thank all of our speakers, Winky, Linda, Minesh, Angelica, and yourself. It's been a really interesting session. When I first started with Invest Hong Kong, I was asked in an interview by one of the trade papers on sourcing about the death of sourcing in Hong Kong. It was going to die. Everyone was moving to China. And we had a conversation, said, no, things are going to change. And they did change. And it's constant change. And I think that is something that we will see. Change is inevitable. And Hong Kong just needs to make itself relevant and adapt to that new situation. So thank you very much indeed for everyone who's taken part today. The PDF of the presentation will be available, as will the recording. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you all for taking part. Thank you, KPMG, for the report. Thank you for Angelica for organising it. So, and thank you for all the people who've attended. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
good afternoon,
Thanks, everyone.
good evening.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thanks.
Bye now.